The information in this podcast is for general informational and educational purposes only. Whilst we love unpacking psychology research and evidence-based insights to support well-being, this podcast is not a substitute for personal mental health care or therapy with a qualified practitioner. Nothing we say should be taken as individualized advice. If anything you hear brings up concerns for you, we strongly encourage you to speak with your GP, psychologist, or another qualified health professional. You deserve support that's tailored to you.
We would like to acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional owners of the unceded lands of the Kulin Nation, on which this podcast is recorded. We acknowledge their rich history and honour the ongoing connection to land, waters, culture, and community. Welcome to This Might Help, a podcast bridging the gap between psychology research and your everyday life. We're your hosts. I'm Dr. Kira Hart.
And I'm Dr. Lauren Rossetti. Today we are unpacking the very common feeling of feeling like you're behind in life and comparing all of your life milestones to everyone else.
Yes, super common. We all experience it.
Yes,
So we're chatting about it today.
Absolutely. We'll be unpacking it. Before we do, as always, we're going to do our wellbeing wins and wobbles for the week. Kira, tell me what yours are.
Do you want my win first or my wobble?
I want your wobble first to
Okay.
end on a win.
My wobble was I went for a run with some girlfriends. Sounds like it's really fun, right? However,
Not for many people, but for you, sure.
I do love running for anyone who's just tuned in. But on this run, I found it really hard to chat and talk
Right.
to my friends whilst running. And I noticed that I've lost a fair bit of fitness over the last few weeks. So that was my wobble, just struggling to chat to my friends whilst running.
Yeah. For context, for anyone else, the ability to run and talk at the same time is
It's
a feat
hard.
of fitness. So I believe you'll get back there.
Thank you. And then my well-being win was today my housemates and I had a working bee at our house. So we dubbed the kitchen. Our oven looks brand new. I have
Wow.
never seen anything more clean in my life. It is impeccable
Love
how
it.
spotless our house is at the moment.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what do they say? Tidy house, tidy mind.
Nice.
Tidy bedroom, tidy mind. So
you're
clear.
you're going into the week.
Clear mind.
You're going into the week with a clear mind.
Yes, fresh mind.
Lovely.
What about you? Wellbeing win and wobble.
My wellbeing win is that I had a very lovely post-work dinner and catch up with a friend last week, which was really nice. And it's because it's warm now and well, I mean, it's been raining, but anyway, on this night it was warm and also it's really late. So I could have this little post-work catch up
Yes.
and dinner with a friend, which is beautiful. My wellbeing wobble is that life has been very busy, which has meant I have not done the grocery shopping and or any of the meal prep for a while. And so have purchased so many of my meals every single day the past week, including lots and lots of Uber Eats and lots of not so good fast food. But it is what it is.
It is what it is.
We're coming out of that wobble and I'll report back hopefully soon about all of the cooking that I've been doing. But for now, it's Uber Eats for me. Yeah. We're talking about something today that has come up in a few of our conversations recently with friends. It is about this anxiety or feeling of restlessness about meeting your life milestones. So things like, getting the job that you've always wanted, getting married, having kids, buying a house, traveling, all of these.
The big life milestones.
Big life milestones. And I found that as we're coming up towards the end of the year, this time when, you're reflecting or you're looking back on what has happened in 2025, maybe you had particular goals or plans or things that you wanted to do. And then you look back and maybe think, oh, where has all the time gone and what has happened?
Exactly.
In
Come November,
2025.
December, everyone's thinking about future New Year's resolutions, but also, hang on, what were my New Year's resolutions of this year?
Yes.
And did I meet them?
Yeah. And sometimes those can include these big life milestone things and trying to tick off some of those things in life. And we, like I said, have been having conversations with friends about this recently, probably because we're in the kind of realm where that like turning 30 milestone is happening for a lot of the people around us.
Yes.
And there is this pressure or feeling of needing to have achieved particular things, you know, at particular ages in your 20s and your 30s and your, like, you know, by the time you turn 40, all of these arbitrary milestones or like timelines we put on ourselves. And lots of things, like we're in the stage where maybe we're seeing engagement after engagement after engagement, wedding after wedding after wedding, babies and new homes and all of these things. And a lot of friends have been chatting to me about kind of comparing themselves to particular milestones, or they have a birthday coming up and they're feeling all of this pressure around the birthday. So not just about the end of year point, but also, oh, okay, this is another year in my life, or I'm hitting this age and I had all of these expectations around what I would have achieved or what would have been ticked off when I had this birthday or when I got to the end of the year.
Exactly. Our 20s and 30s are such an acute stage of life for these large milestones.
Yeah.
And if I think back to when I was in high school, I definitely would have said, oh, I'll get married by 27. So I'll meet my partner by 24 and we'll be engaged for a year. And now that I'm 27, none of that has happened, not even close. So it is such a busy period, though, for those major life milestones. I was chatting with a friend earlier today, actually, and she was saying my entire Instagram feed is just engagement rings, babies. My entire Instagram feed is just like psychology related content, but that's probably a personal thing, my algorithm. But it's so common to have these big life milestones. And then for those who maybe aren't hitting them or aren't having those experiences.
At the time that they also maybe thought or wanted them to
society
happen.
thinks should happen. That's maybe where anxiety kicks in, or feeling as though you're being left behind.
Yes. And like you said, seeing it on social media or seeing these things kind of, they're delivered to you all the time because we see everyone's life updates, and they are the things that, you know, rightly so, people want to share and celebrate. But then for people who are maybe feeling stressed or worried or anxious about these, you know, particular birthdays or the end of the year or these timelines coming up, that can create this sense of anxiety, which is what we are talking about today, which is this concept around milestone anxiety, or essentially it's just being anxious or feeling worry about those life milestones.
Exactly. So milestone anxiety isn't in the DSM. It's not a specific disorder, but we're chatting around the concept of feeling anxious around these big life milestones.
Yeah, and it's a really common source, or can be a very common source of anxiety, to worry about like these big points in life and these expectations around kind of what we want to achieve. Milestone anxiety, like we've already prefaced to, describes this pressure we can feel to reach certain kind of traditional life milestones. So things like finding a partner, getting a particular, you know, type of job, climbing the career ladder, having children, buying a house, getting married, so on. And it's around, I guess, these pressures we put on ourselves to have achieved those milestones by a particular time.
Exactly. And it also speaks to feeling as though you're falling behind others who maybe have received a promotion or are engaged, and having those internal thoughts of, I should have done this by now, or I'm lagging behind. And it's that negative internal monologue around pressure and anxiety due to life stages.
Yeah, these can also look different for different types of milestones. So it's not just that, you might be feeling behind on all of them, although that could also be the case. You might have, or people might have achieved a number of milestones within the time frame that they wanted to, and it could still be about one particular one that you feel you're behind on compared to other people. Like it might be, oh, you're married and you've had a kid, and that all happened within the time frame that you wanted, but you haven't bought a house, and so you feel this milestone anxiety around that particular thing. Like it doesn't need to be all of them. Yeah.
What's really interesting about this milestone anxiety is that according to survey data, it's increasingly common amongst younger generations, such as Gen Z and millennials, compared to older generations like baby boomers. So there was research, or there was a big survey conducted out of the UK.
Yeah, by Relate, which is a charity that provides like relationship counselling and support.
Yes.
And they did this survey on around, just over 2,000 people who they polled. And like you said, 77% of millennials, so those aged 25 to 39, and 83% of Gen Z, so 16 to 24-year-olds, were currently feeling pressure to reach life milestones, compared to around 66% of people over 75 and 70% of baby boomers.
But this was when baby boomers compared themselves to being a younger age. So let's say take it in their 20s or 30s, baby boomers reported when they were in their 20s or 30s, they felt less pressure to achieve these milestones compared to what people do nowadays.
Okay, so they were reflecting back. Okay.
They were reflecting back, which is super interesting. And I suppose I was thinking about why might that be the case. And I suppose a lot of our life milestones nowadays are a lot harder to achieve than previous generations. Like housing affordability and being able to buy a house is so difficult and such a massive feat for our generation or for younger generations, whereas it might have been something that was easier to achieve in previous generations, and therefore there wasn't that pressure or anxiety around being able to achieve that milestone. And perhaps similar with like dating and relationships, there was obviously a very different dating culture historically, whereas today's younger generations are experiencing more pressure with dating and relationships compared to previous generations.
Yeah, and the landscape's pretty tricky with the online dating world. So all of those feeling this kind of milestone pressure within this survey, of those that said they were feeling the pressure, 39% of them said that it was coming from themselves, followed by from society generally. And then the next kind of level of where they said pressure was coming from was from parents. And Gen Z were the most likely to say the pressure was coming from social media and the media in general.
Yeah.
So, that pressure from seeing all of this stuff all the time.
But interesting, it's like the biggest pressure we feel is coming internally. It's from ourselves and kind of the little laws or rules we have for ourselves. Like, I should get this job by this age, or I should move out of home by this age.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we think about why this kind of concept of milestone anxiety might be happening, and they've listed some of the kind of identified reasons from that survey, but comparison and that social media kind of amplifying our ability to make those comparisons is one of those things that can contribute to just general anxiety about where we're at in life. But I think if I'm, reflecting on the conversations I've had with my friends recently, I feel that a lot of this is coming from what we're seeing online, and also just so easily being able to keep track of where everyone is up to.
Exactly. Social comparison is so pertinent nowadays. I think I could log on to LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and see who's got promotions in the last week, who's engaged from my high school, and I can find out so much information that I can use to compare myself to others with. Whereas if I think about my mum, she finished school, maybe stayed in touch with her close group of friends, but she wouldn't hear those big life milestone updates from her peers unless she went to like a school reunion in once every 10 years. Like she wouldn't know who was engaged or who was doing what and where they were working unless you kind of had that big catch up and sat down with someone and spoke about it. But now you log on to LinkedIn and you're like, oh, okay, they've got promoted and they've left their job and they're now overseas.
Yeah. Even without or even if we said, they do see all of that, let's say they caught up with their whole high school every year or something and happen to know all the milestones. Now we can also compare ourselves to people we don't know. So we can compare ourselves to influencers, to just strangers, like anyone on the internet. And we have the ability to then make those comparisons all the time and see what other people have, what they've achieved. And again, the highlight reel. And then also are able to compare ourselves with those people that we don't even know.
As you're saying that, it makes so much sense why Gen Z and millennials are facing this milestone anxiety more so than older demographics when they were our age.
Yeah. So with comparison and within this context of social media, and we've talked about this in other episodes as well, but we have upward comparisons. And so this is when we compare ourselves to someone that we perceive as better or kind of more successful than ourselves. And this can often trigger that kind of self-doubt or envy of other people and what they've achieved. We then have downward comparison, and that's when we compare ourselves to someone that we perceive as worse off to the position that we're in. And this is something, I guess, in kind of the psychological theory world, this is something that can boost self-esteem or, I guess when we do this downward comparison, we're more thinking of ourselves in a superior position. But with milestone anxiety, we're almost exclusively making those upward comparisons to others. So, when we're worried, when we're seeing other people achieving those milestones, then we're kind of always making that upward comparison of, oh, they're in a position that I want to be in, or they've achieved a milestone that I want to achieve. So we're kind of doing that upward comparison a lot, which is associated with, that feeling of self-doubt or some of those kind of uncomfortable feelings that we don't want to be stuck with all the time. Another element of this milestone anxiety, or when it might be more common, is if we're really perfectionistic. Because when, if you experience perfectionism, it can also be about life things. So you might feel, I need to achieve this milestone at the right time. I said it was going to be when I turned 28 that I was going to do that thing. And so I need to achieve it at that time, and that's the right time and that's the perfect time. So if we're perfectionistic, then we also might fall into those traps of really wanting to have achieved these milestones at really particular, quote, perfect times in our life.
There's also statistical evidence to show that we are experiencing these life milestones at a later age compared to previous generations. For example, the average age of a woman having her first child 15 years ago was 28, whereas today it's 30 years old. So as time goes on, we're achieving or experiencing these milestones later. Same with house and home ownership. Nowadays, more people are renting. The housing crisis makes buying a house super, super unaffordable and unattainable for so many people.
And then there's, if you're going to uni and you're doing these longer degrees, that's more time, and you might delay other milestones because it makes sense as well, which can shift that timeline. And
comparing ourselves to, let's say, our parents who maybe had purchased a home, started a family, and had achieved all these milestones at a much earlier stage than their children will.
Yes. And so I guess we're kind of in that shift, which means that we're applying these pre-existing social timelines of when we should meet these milestones, like, you know, should in quotation marks.
Yes.
We're applying these standard timelines, social timelines of particular milestones to our current lives, when really the circumstances and the situations have shifted. You know,
So
it's
different.
Yeah, it's different now. The expectations are different, but we're still often, and maybe it's, you know, around this age as well, where we're still holding ourselves to those previous timelines, thinking, okay, well, I'm turning 30 and that means that I should have ticked off XYZ, but XYZ are nowhere in sight.
Yes.
And maybe it's, even when we truly reflect and think about it, we maybe don't even necessarily want those things right now. We maybe don't need to do those things right now. They're milestones that can happen later. And yet we still, even with that reflection of knowing, for me, this milestone is not something that I am wanting or expecting of myself by the time I'm 30.
Or ever.
Exactly. And yet we can still feel that anxiousness and pressure and comparison and stress when we look at others that achieve that milestone by that time.
100%.
Yeah. We know a lot of us are experiencing this milestone anxiety, or it's been very common in the chats with our friends and others recently, especially, like we said, as you kind of reach the end of the year and that comes up as a time frame, or you're, you know, hitting a birthday and that's coming up. But it might look a little bit different for different people. Sometimes this can be that worrying or rumination that you're, you know, quote, not where you should be in life. And that feeling existing or coming up for you. It can also be a feeling or pressure around those rules, like we've talked a lot about. So, you know, people might have a really particular birthday that is like the birthday I was meant to achieve this milestone by, or the year that this was meant to happen in, and these really kind of strict rules around when a milestone has to happen.
For example, I'm going to be engaged, or I must be engaged by the time I'm 35.
Yes. Yeah. And just setting that kind of strict guideline or rule in their minds. It can again be that comparison. So
this is a big one, like comparing yourself to your friends or family, or even those people, as you mentioned, Lauren, on social media who you don't know. You're comparing yourself to strangers. But for example, you might think, all my housemates are in a relationship and I'm not. Like, is there something wrong with me? Like, I'm the odd one out. And, you know, comparing yourself and where you are and what milestones you've experienced or not.
And that can make the experience of seeing those milestones often really tricky as well, which is really normal to experience. But it might be that every time you see another person, so, you know, it might be a friend or a family member or a colleague or a stranger, but when you see them achieve that milestone, that it can feel really upsetting.
Yeah. And it might feel as though you're unable to celebrate their happiness. And that can sometimes elicit feelings of guilt, because you want to be happy for your friends. You want to be happy for your siblings or family or whoever it is that's experiencing that milestone. But at the same time, it's really understandable that if that's something you're wanting, but you haven't achieved that yet or experienced that yet, it makes sense why you would be feeling upset if you compare yourself to them in that situation.
And especially in the cases where there are things outside of your control that limit you from being able to, or being getting to experience those milestones. And that, again, can be a really, really tricky space to be in, where there are other factors that are going on, and that's a barrier. And then those comparisons can become really tricky.
For example, difficulty with fertility, or illnesses and sickness, or really challenging financial circumstances that we have no control over and wouldn't wish upon anyone. But these things really do impact achieving milestones, and it can be really, really tricky and bring up all these difficult emotions. And for anyone who is experiencing that, as always, we recommend seeking support from a GP, psychologist, a qualified health professional who can support through the real difficult nature of wanting to achieve a milestone, but having circumstances that are completely out of your control that are making that unattainable or difficult.
Yeah. And those, like you said, really tricky emotions, and that really, really challenging time, often a really good idea to have support from a psychologist to kind of help you through that time and that journey as well. With some of these milestones we've talked about, or I guess when people are coming up or experiencing this social comparison for milestones that they do feel like they have control over, or they're working towards, but it's not going within the timeline that they've envisioned. There are some, I guess, strategies or things that we can do to kind of help us work through this milestone anxiety experience. One of those is to kind of zoom out and get a broader perspective on the situation. Like we talked about before, these traditional milestones like marriage and, house and whatnot, they're part of this social script or social norm, but we don't all have to follow that script.
And we don't have to follow it according to the timelines that your friends or your parents or people who you follow on social media, influencers, meet those milestones by.
Yeah, and in the same order and all of those things. It, can be reflecting on which milestones are truly important to me, which ones really matter to me, what are those milestones, and are there other ones that I'm holding myself to this extremely high pressure or timeline, or I'm feeling stressed about, but actually maybe they're not even a milestone that is really truly important to me.
Yes. Yeah. It's not a big life goal of mine. Yeah. It's just a big life goal of my friendship group. And therefore I've kind of fallen into the belief that I also need to achieve it, even though I don't really want to.
Yeah, and it can happen. Sometimes you turn around and you're like, wait a second. Suddenly everyone has moved to this one place. Yes. Everyone has moved overseas and they're working there. Suddenly now, wait a second, I am meant to move to London and work. But maybe that is not a milestone at all that was on my radar. It's just now the entire friendship group has moved overseas. So yes, a reflection on which milestones are actually my ones. Which ones are for me. One thing to do when that can come up for us is to be thinking about the language we're using to kind of talk about or reflect on that comparison. So, I see Kira and Kira has done XYZ thing, rather than me saying to myself, I'm a failure or I'm behind because I haven't achieved XYZ milestone. Instead, it can be, that's very exciting.
Yeah.
But then also, okay, well, I'm working towards that. I'm making steps towards that. Or maybe it's actually I've been doing all of these other things and those are really important to me and I'm not ready for that milestone yet. So trying to reframe some of the language we use to talk to ourselves.
I think a great example of this is our podcast. We're just getting started. Yeah. And when I look on social media and see other podcast hosts who have been doing it for years, and I listen to how articulate they are and how popular their podcast is, sometimes I do find myself comparing to them. But if I come from a place of, I'm nowhere near as good as them, I'm a failure, I will obviously feel upset and distressed about them.
Yeah.
Whereas if I reframe it in my head as I'm just getting started on this awesome journey, I have so much to learn,
Yes.
and I'm going to grow so much and have so much fun with Lauren, I'm obviously a lot more happy and excited to do a podcast with you.
Yeah. A daily reminder we both need, I'm sure. With that comparison, and that it is often happening on social media, because that's where we're seeing a lot of these things these days, just stepping away from social media for some time, as in just reducing the amount of that comparison that we're exposed to, can be helpful. Or even, like we've said in the other social media episodes, noticing who we kind of follow and where some of that stuff can come up. Like if we're following a lot of people we don't know, and there where we're experiencing that comparison from, where we're like having a lot of that milestone anxiety because of that comparison, sometimes reducing that can be helpful.
Yeah. Another thing that can be helpful with milestones is shifting your focus to the process of achieving the milestones rather than the end goal or destination of said milestone. For example, if you're really hoping to get a certain job, focusing on your enjoyment of studying that in university, or your enjoyment in having conversations as you prepare to do the interview with friends and families and doing mock interviews, for example, and taking the pressure off actually achieving the milestone itself can be really helpful, because as we've spoken about, sometimes milestones are out of your control and you can't help it if the hiring manager picks another person or not. But if you focus on the process and focus on upskilling yourself and, enjoying learning about the job, you're less likely to be disappointed if you don't get the job. At least you've kind of learned a lot and you're better equipped for the next kind of interview you take.
Yeah. And you're building skills and other things that are leading you there.
Exactly. As Miley Cyrus says, it's the climb.
Yes. I'm going to play that tomorrow, my drive to work.
And our final tip for coping with milestone anxiety is managing unhelpful thinking. So knowing that we don't have to believe every thought we have. So that critical thought in your head saying you're behind because you haven't achieved that promotion yet isn't true. You can reframe that thought and think, I'm just getting started in my career. Buckle up. I'm going to have an amazing career and I'm just in the early stages of it.
Yeah. And that everyone is different. Everyone is doing these things on different timelines. All of their circumstances are different. And our brains have a very annoying way.
Yes.
You were going to say tricky. That's much more neutral and probably appropriate.
It's annoying though.
Yeah. They have this annoying way of only seeing everyone else's achievements and those they've achieved that thing, and a habit of not reflecting on all of the wonderful, amazing things that we have achieved. And so it's putting that, like we said, into perspective and letting our brains come back to those things and think, okay, well, maybe this bit is not where I want it to be. But like you said, I'm working towards it. I'm on this journey. And also thinking and reflecting, let me just sit down and think about all of the wonderful things that I have achieved and the things that have led me here today, because I bet there are many of them that could fill up a list.
Love that. So let's celebrate coming to the end of today's episode.
Yes.
Thank you so much for listening. As always, we are on Instagram and TikTok at This Might Help
Podcast. And the video version is on YouTube. It's very funny that at this episode stage
I don't know our handles.
Yeah, that's okay. Maybe it can be your well-being win next week that you've remembered it. We also will have resources and info from today's episode in the show notes. And as always, we have the helplines and additional supports in there as well if anyone needs. Otherwise, we will see you in next week's episode.
Catch you then.
Bye.